Not only are the current generations rude, but they lack basic manners. An amount of Gen Z's and Generation Alpha's ignorance is due to technology. Occasionally, a group of kids will be out in public causing a disturbance, for example at a restaurant or store. With no regard for others around them, the kids unapologetically carry on with their chatty annoyances, ultimately ruining others' experiences. The current generations have more difficult time immersing themselves in the employment world, where one may need a job in order to sustain their lifestyle. This could also result in laziness and reliance on their parents to provide money rather than earning it themselves. Gosh, I love it when people speak straight out of their asses without much consideration for the topic at hand and then call it opinion. Anyway, bonjour, my name's Alice. I've been making educational content online and offline for a while now. Education is a huge part of my life and somehow I haven't made a lot of videos about it, so today is the day. Let's talk about the kids, Gen Alpha. What is it again? Oh yeah, they can't read, they're lazy, they don't respect anyone anymore, and their parents are really bad and it's all their fault. So what are the root causes of all this mess? What can we learn from it and what can we do about it? Now, you know me, I'm not a fan of boring answers like, we live in a society and therefore this and this and that.
Is it social media specifically? Is it getting exposed to drugs? Is it bad parenting? So I'm wondering, what do you think the cause is here?
I'm glad you asked. When I think about education, I think about critical thinking, popular access to knowledge, the birth of the encyclopedia, freedom of speech.
All I say is freedom of speech. It's very simple. My attitude is freedom of speech. With me, it's freedom of speech. It's freedom of speech.
No, not that one, please. Those ideals were shared by philosophers of the Enlightenment, stretching from the 17th century to the 18th century. One of those thinkers, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is Swiss and not French, like I said last time, which caused a lot of drama in the comment section because Swiss people weren't happy about it and they were totally right. Anyway, Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote a book that is going to be interesting today. The book is titled Émile or On Education, and it's about the art of forging men. The key themes of Rousseau's philosophy are freedom, authenticity, and to him, those ideals could be achieved by developing a healthy skepticism towards what was called the polite society, by actually getting away from them and closer to a state of nature. In Émile, Rousseau showed how that could be implemented through education. The child must be able to play outside, to evolve with little constraints and learn about what they're genuinely curious about. Yes, it is proto-gentle parenting, you guessed it. In fact, Rousseau's ideas had a lot of influence on the way affluent people of the time chose to raise their children, and also on the way future progressive thinkers would envision education. So on the one hand, you had conservative religious institutions which were dominant during the Enlightenment. So we're talking about institutions that thought that a child's development needed to be constrained by strict, unchanging rules, or that giving too much freedom to children was a threat. And on the other hand, you had progressives like Rousseau, who hoped to find a sort of middle ground where well-formed adults would help children transform themselves and become independent, free-thinking adults.
The free thinkers, the men with high testosterone levels.
No, not these ones. You find similar ideals of self-development in the philosophy of Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher and the, quote, first educator of China. Contrary to modern Western culture and its obsession with the life purpose, Confucius believed that a person shouldn't be treated as a tool meant to only serve one purpose, that it was reflective of a limited mindset, and we want a growth mindset. That's what led to the creation of the Chinese imperial examinations, which selected the most educated, the smartest Chinese citizens across social classes, across the entire territory, to then give them a role in state bureaucracy. Candidates weren't expected to be good at their future potential job. They weren't even tested on that, no. They were tested on their knowledge of various things related to culture, literature, etc. Many say that imperial examinations were an example of meritocracy, and while it is true that any man could participate, some could afford to pay for specialized teachers, to live in the right places, and that definitely helped. Nevertheless, Confucianism shows us that there are many ways to approach education, and that the Protestant ethic of this is my purpose, I need to put all my time and energy into it and only read books and watch YouTube videos about this very specific topic, and then I'll be successful and wealthy. Well, that can be a bit limiting. In our capitalist societies, which are a product of the Protestant ethic, Max Weber said, we see education as a commodity, a passport to a specific career aligned with our purpose. Teaching becomes yet another service bought by the student with a set of expectations. Contrary to what Rousseau and Confucius believed in, the 21st century student doesn't enter the classroom with the desire to self-improve, to develop various skills, or with the willingness to be changed by the teacher. No. The 21st century student expects that the teacher will go through the curriculum, give them a good mark and the corresponding credits so that they can get their diploma, which will then give them a great career, so that in 10 to 15 years they can pay for their kids to go through the same process again and again and again. Now, how does this connect to Gen Alpha and the fact that they don't have manners? Well, as the capitalist approach of education, so a purely transactional approach, becomes the norm, then the fact that we see educators as service providers will become the norm too. In fact, it's already the case. The educator is no longer accountable to the ideal of forging educated freethinkers. They are accountable to students, parents, the administration. They have to please them, and that really changes the dynamics of teaching. It means that the classroom is no longer a place for dialogue and self-formation, because that is not in the curriculum, and you have to stick to the curriculum, otherwise they'll all get mad at you because customers' power. The real problem for me is that instead of looking at the way capitalism deteriorated the role of the educator, people rather focus on the repercussions and how to cancel them. Discipline is the answer. We need to force those Gen Alpha kids to be more disciplined. We need to restore educators' authority. So, in simpler terms, the response to capitalism's deterioration of the education system is conservatism. Okay, it's time for Rousseau, Confucius, and Weber to leave the room and let another group of dudes take their place. We're talking about Foucault, Freire, Bourdieu, and Passeron. Voilà. So when I say that the education system is conservative, what I mean is that its goal is to reproduce the social order again and again and again. Sociologists Bourdieu and Passeron write that as long as nothing disrupts its harmony, the system can, in some ways, escape history. So that means the current socio-economic context, by confining itself to the role of producing its reproducers in a cycle of eternal return, since it is paradoxically by ignoring requirements other than that of its own reproduction that it best contributes to the reproduction of the social order. I had to reread this several times before fully understanding it, so feel free to do the same thing, but basically what sociologists Bourdieu and Passeron say is that schools reproduce already existing social inequalities for the benefit of dominant classes. Rich kids are more likely to succeed at school, poor kids are more likely to fail. So it is in the interest of dominant classes to make sure that schools operate outside of politics, outside of social realities, to ensure that those inequalities remain, that the social order that benefits them so much is preserved. This echoes the work of philosopher Michel Foucault. Well, Foucault believed that we live in a society based on discipline, that discipline is enforced by institutions like the prison, the military, and the school. The timetable, the bell, the unquestionable authority of the teacher, the uniform, all these things which appear as supernormal for most of us prepare us to become docile individuals. Actually, as one of my American friends told me recently, it seems that French education, whether it's directed at children, students, or workers, is largely based on shame. As someone who has experienced that education system firsthand, I saw how the shaming specifically targeted kids with disabilities, working class kids, racialized kids. I have one clear memory of that day where a working class classmate came late. The teacher was standing up in the middle of the rows, we were all sitting, and he stared at her as she walked past him, deeply embarrassed and apologetic. He said something like, "Pah," using perfume to cover up the smell of someone who hasn't taken a shower. Everybody laughed. We were expected to laugh to get his validation. I remember smiling, but feeling like something was wrong, that what the teacher was doing was really wrong. I knew this girl, our mothers were friends, and I knew she lived in a tiny house with a lot of siblings, so It must have been a challenge to get 5 minutes to take a shower in the morning and be on time for school. It clearly wasn't her fault, but she was shamed for it. She sat down and stayed quiet for the entire day. As Bourdieu explained, the school is a place where a lot of symbolic violence happens. This is exactly what I've just described. If your spelling isn't good, if you don't speak very well, if you have a badly connoted accent, or simply if you don't dress well enough, people will let you know, and even if they don't, you'll quickly notice it and feel bad about it. I think we all know that shame doesn't have to be inflicted by others in order to be felt, but it's clear that the feeling of shame often translates into obedience and the attempt to cancel one's differences. Once the student is put in that position, it makes it easier to establish the educator's authority. Philosopher Paulo Freire talked about the banking system of education in his book The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. He referred to the fact that students are seen as recipients. They are passively consuming what the almighty educator tells them. That vision of what education should be is not liberating in any way, he says. It does not encourage critical thinking. It once again reproduces this social order. What Freire recommends instead is to encourage the educator to establish a dialogue with the students and accept that the educator can learn from them too. You find those ideas in gentle parenting, in the Montessori school system. The goal is to consider the child as an actual person with needs and a desire to self-actualize. Now, while the institution of the school has remained quite conservative in its structure, the idea of gentle parenting has gained a lot of popularity since the 1970s. There are countless books, tutorials, videos, podcasts, seminars on how to be a gentle parent. The issue I see though, and that might cause the current Gen Alpha moral panic, is a misunderstanding that gentle parenting equals no authority at all, or that authority is something bad, something conservative. So I was watching this video the other day. It's a discussion between a left-wing representative and a philosopher called Geoffroy de la Gannerie. And at some point during that conversation, de la Gannerie says something that I found really interesting. The master points to the illusion I had. They allow me to upgrade my relationship with knowledge and therefore to liberate me. To have people who know better than you isn't a form of domination, it's a form of collective emancipation. So what he said here is that accepting authority can be liberating. For example, if you go to a museum and you booked a tour with a guide, you will follow that guide. You will stop when they stop. You will stay quiet as they explain what is going on in that painting. And you choose to do all of that because you know that these are the conditions to then increase your knowledge and your understanding of the world. So it liberates you in some aspects. The reason why you did that is because you thought that the museum guide had authority for that task. You understood that they knew better than you trusted them, their credentials, and you were willing to do what they wanted you to do. Now, obviously, this has limits. We have to remain critical of who we give our trust to and why, having a lot of followers on social media isn't necessarily a sign that this or that person should be trusted. But on the other hand, if, let's say, 99% of climate scientists explain that the Earth is getting warmer, then yeah, I'm going to shut up and listen to what they have to say about it. It's almost a feeling of relief, to understand that, yeah, you cannot be an expert in everything, but there are people who have done the job for you and are willing to communicate it with you, with sources, with facts, etc., etc. So if we go back to the topic of education, teaching, we can say that a lot of educators have lost authority in the sense that students refuse to trust them. They refuse to believe that educators can change them because it's not what they expect from them. Once again, capitalism has turned the educated-educator relationship into a transaction in which the educator is just a medium between the information and the student. But capitalism has also promoted the culture of meritocracy, in which authority is correlated with merit. And sorry to say that, but an underpaid educator is not seen as a figure of merit, someone we can learn from. So we are in a situation where both students and educators are reluctant to see the school, the classroom, as a place that can change them, that can liberate them. Because the educator operates in a conservative structure that, one, produces a lot of symbolic violence, especially towards working class kids, especially towards kids who have a culture that is different from the dominant one, especially kids who have disabilities, and two, that the student is perceived as a threat, a body to be disciplined, or a recipient for a specific type of knowledge. And students and parents, on the other hand, see the educator as an underpaid service provider with no merits, let's be honest. Do I need to say that nothing good comes out of that? I mean, we see it. Neoliberal governments choose to enforce discipline as a response. Parents' frustrations grow because the service they pay for is not providing the results it is supposed to provide. Those who can afford to then choose to homeschool or put their kids into expensive private schools. Then the pressure on public schools increases because those ultra-personalized private schools set the new standard for education. It's all about the kid, building their brand, their career, their network. As soon as they're born, I could go on and on and on, but I think you get the idea. The Gen Alpha moral panic is yet another example of how systemic issues are turned into individual problems. Neoliberalism, capitalism is the problem. The way parents, kids, and educators behave is just a reflection of that. You know, that's why I'm always super skeptical when people explain societal problems with easy, universal answers like, oh, parents need to better educate their kids, or oh, social media is pure evil. It always puts the blame on the individual, and because as individuals we have barely any resources or power to change the immensity of the problem, only collectives do, then the response to the societal issues is conservatism, more discipline, more punishment. This is not limited to school, you can see this pattern repeated elsewhere. I made a video about how liberal feminism turns into authoritarianism, you can watch it, it's exactly the same thing. Neoliberalism and conservatism go hand in hand, so don't be surprised if your favorite capitalist or conservative commentators don't talk about the things I've talked about today. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, the conversation continues in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, if it's not already done. Before I leave, I would like to thank my patrons for their support, and a special thanks to top tier patrons: James, Ojwal, Pablo, Patrick, Ria, Boris, Jory, Ivan, Remy, Toki, Koriji, Tristan, Patricia, Donage, Alex, Ran, Ian, Lenny, Manuel, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. And before I leave, I need to talk to you about the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to grow your presence online. They give you a bunch of tools to create your ideal websites. So this is mine so far, Alice Capelle. I use it as a platform to kind of show all the work that I do on YouTube, my contributions, but also my book. I also added all my social media accounts. You also have analytical tools. You can run effective email campaigns. On their website, you can also get advice from professionals on how to build your website, etc. So many things you can do. So if you're interested in it, if you want to try it out, then go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And once you're ready to go public, then you can go to squarespace.com/AliceCapelle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring the video. And yeah, that's it. See you very soon.